I think as we're all sheltered in place and inside, and we long for people, I think we realize just how more important community is. And, whether it's just friends and family or just a larger community of social clubs where you go and you meet people and you talk about things you love. I think once restrictions are removed, I think you're going to see a real increase in the amount of clubs people join.
You're listening to Investing for Good, a show that brings you the stories and strategies of people who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. And now, here are your hosts, Annie Dickerson and Julie Lamb.
Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm doing good, Annie. I am just so excited about this episode today because we got to talk about travel.
Yes.
And I have been itching to get on the road and get to Hawaii and do my trip and everything, like really itching to do that. And so it was so fun to talk about traveling and all the fun stuff like that. So yeah.
I'm curious, did you travel a lot as a kid?
I did because my mother worked for the airlines. And so growing up, I mean, I have memories flying standby, of course, and having back in the days, you had to get dressed up. And so I would wear like little patent leather, like heeled shoes with like tights and stuff.
So cute.
And it was, and just traveling all over. I mean, I remember going to New Zealand and Korea and Japan and China and Canada, Vancouver. I mean, we went everywhere.
Wow.
And I feel like when my kids when my friends were, doing summer school or they were still in school, I was doing a bunch of travel. And so for me at a very early age, before the age of 10, I had been all over the world. And it was something I hated back then because I had to leave my friends and they would all talk about spring break or, summer school, but I got to go traveling. And now I feel like it's such a big part of who I am. So
yeah, I know. So, sort of the same. I traveled a lot as a kid as well. We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't fly a lot of places, but we drove a lot of places. So we took a lot of road trips. And same, I wasn't really like, as a kid, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to travel. My kids these days, thankfully, they love to travel. But when I was a kid, I was like, I'd just as much rather stay home and watch TV,
Yeah.
I'm super excited. This conversation that we had with Nomadic Matt Kepnes. He's a bestselling author of How to Travel the World on $50 a Day. He's been traveling full-time for years, and he runs his business Nomadic Matt from anywhere in the world that he is. And it's just incredible how he didn't travel as a kid. He didn't travel very much at all. And then after college, he really sort of fell into it. He, tried a small trip on his own and really got hooked and turned this into a full-time thing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And one of the things that he said early in the episode was about, working a full-time job and having such a regimented schedule and how, when you travel, that travel is anything but that. And that was kind of how he discovered his passion for travel. And I remember too, when I was in my early 20s and I was in between jobs and I had gone and just traveled around and went to Japan for a week and went to Maui, and I kind of just traveled all over. And I too discovered that same sort of freedom of, the days kind of are however you want it to be. And I think that is what fuels so much of my love and passion for travel with my family and my kids now. So it's great.
And one of the things I love about traveling with family, when my kids were babies, people were like, how are you traveling with a 6-month-old? That seems horrible, and I would say, you know what? When I traveling with a baby, there's, often you have to improvise. There's no changing table. There's no set place for your diapers. You have to just figure it out on the go. And I love that, especially when you come home and you're like, oh, I do have a set place place for the diapers and my wipes are laid out for me. Oh, this isn't so bad. It sort of puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
But anyway, without further ado, here is our conversation with Matt Kepnes of nomadicmatt.com. Matt, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, Matt, I'm so excited to dive in today and pick your brain. But for 10 years now, I know that you've been a world traveler. You've traveled to over 100 countries, which I can barely wrap my mind around, traveled hundreds of thousands of miles, slept in over 1,000 hostels, and learned multiple languages, all of which is absolutely incredible. And on top of that, your blog, nomadicmatt.com, brings in over $750,000 a year. So I got to ask, how did you get started in this crazy adventure? Did you just travel a ton as a kid? Did you go all over the world? Did you always imagine yourself living a nomadic lifestyle? Or how did all of that come about?
I didn't really grow up in a travel family. We went on a cruise once. That's about as adventurous as we got. We drive down a lot to see my grandma and grandpa in Florida. But other than that, that was really it. It wasn't until I started traveling in 2006 that I even went across the country. So I didn't really grow up in an environment where travel was important. It wasn't something many of my friends did. In college, I had one friend who did study abroad. I have everybody I knew in college. He was the only person that, most of my friends didn't even go to like Mexico for, crazy spring break. And so it wasn't until after I graduated and had a job and, had that 2 weeks vacation time that I decided to, start traveling. That's what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
You have 2 weeks vacation, you have a 401k, like that's what adults do.
Yeah. So you grow up, you don't travel a ton, you don't see people around you traveling a ton. You graduate college, you get a job with this luxurious 2-week vacation. So where did you decide to go for your first vacation?
I went to Costa Rica. I was trying to go to Australia with a friend Joe, but he backed out. And so I ended up on this tour company's website for a 2-week trip to Costa Rica, and I ended up booking it. I forget how I found that website. Probably was just searching random tour companies. And I went, and it was the best 2 weeks. It was really, when you have a corporate office job kind of thing, your life is pretty scheduled, and travel is anything but scheduled. So I really loved the random nature of the road, where you're the captain of your own ship and you can really do anything you want. And so I sort of fell in love with travel, and I understood why everybody loved their vacation, and talked about it with such reverence.
What kind of work were you doing after college?
I worked in healthcare, low level, administrative, clerical stuff. I had a couple of different jobs in this hospital I worked at. I moved around positions, but nothing really exciting.
So I'm curious, at what point so you took that 2-week vacation, and then at what point were you like, okay, this is, forget the job, forget the traditional 9 to 5, I'm going to go make a career out of this, or I'm going to go do, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? What was that defining moment, do you feel like?
I think it was probably around 2010, 2011, where I really moved from just having a hobby blog into something that I was going to do full time. And, it happened by chance. None of this was, I'm going to start this blog. It's going to become a business, and we're going to make money from it. I'm going to have employees and blah. It was just, I had a blog. I enjoyed blogging. I wanted to make money online simply because I wanted to keep traveling. So I had a lot of ad sense, Google ad websites back in the day. And this was just sort of side hustle that just grew and grew and grew. And something I was like, well, I should do this full time.
Yeah. Wait, so 2006, you go on this 2-week trip to Costa Rica, you get home, you continue your job, your corporate job, and then 2010, you turned this blog into full time. Well, what happened between 2006 and 2010? Were you traveling more and more regularly?
Yeah. So, I mean, in 2006, I put my job to go travel the world for what was supposed to be a year, but it ended up being 18 months. And when I came home, I ended up creating the website because I had a temp job and I had a lot of time on my hands. And so my sister graduated college that year. So once she graduated, I went away again. And then I just kept traveling. And so, I had this website as a side thing. I taught English in Asia for a bit. And then it wasn't until about 2010 that I was making enough from the website that it could be a full-time thing.
Back then, gosh, I gotta remember 2006, 7, and 8. I don't know that I knew anybody who was making money from a blog. Did you know that that was a thing that people were doing, or did you just sort of just start it as a side thing, thinking it was going to be a hobby, and then you started realizing that you could make money from it?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, people just made a lot of money from running marketing websites. So you have a website that would, let's say, like how to train your beagle. And you create all these websites and you just throw a bunch of Google ads on them and people would click, and it was really easy to rank high on Google. But there were a few bloggers, just like pure bloggers, who made good money. There's some of them aren't around, but some of them are like Pro Blogger and the Bloggess, Tim Ferriss, so there were people making money back then. Not as much because it was still very much an art thing that was uncorrupted by influencers and all that stuff.
In 2010, like such an interesting time to be trying to figure out how to make money because it was like, 2008 and 9 were at the bottom of the market. Businesses are shutting down, everyone's closing. And yet you found a way to make money off of the internet and enough to travel the world and replace your income. Like that's pretty amazing. I mean, were you like, was it a ton of like fun? Were you just like, oh my gosh, like I know exactly what I'm doing? Or was it just like, wow, I got lucky? Or kind of what did that look and feel like for you?
Well, in crisis, there is opportunity. But again, my goals back then, I just wanted to keep traveling. I mean, I didn't really know what I wanted as a career. I just wanted to know I didn't want to do temp work anymore. So I went back to Asia to teach and start, then I started learning about this whole, like, you can make money online by running these stupid websites that basically did nothing but get people to click ads. So I started that. And that's where I really learned a lot about SEO and sort of the online space. And I brought that knowledge into my blog. And then it just sort of took off. I mean, COVID aside, even in a recession, people really travel. In fact, if anything, people are more price sensitive because they have less money. So, being a budget traveler and ranking really high in Google and talking about that was really, helpful in growing everything.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about that. How in those days or even now, how do you decide where you're going to travel to? And then, I mean, I assume you know much more now than you did when you started, but back then, how did you set about creating a budget or finding places that you could stay frugally? How did you make all those plans so that you can continue to travel?
Back in those days, it was guidebooks all the way. I mean, there were very few blogs and
physical books.
Physical books, yeah, those were lots of things. Lots of forums, but you just talk to other travelers. I mean, it's the same thing people do and could still do now if they wanted to, but they tend to just be hooked on their phone. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I still take guidebooks.
So after Costa Rica, then what was the next trip? And then how did you decide where in the world you wanted to go?
I went to Thailand. I wanted to go with a friend, and he says I suggested Thailand, but I say he suggested Thailand. So we remember the story differently. Well, but we both agree I originally wanted to go to the Galapagos, and he did not want to go. So we ended up in Thailand, and it was there that I started to meet backpackers. I mean, that was like really the first time I had met them. And so I was really intrigued by this lifestyle of just sort of endless travel. and I hated my job. And I thought, I was getting an MBA at the time. I knew I was going to work in healthcare. So I figured, what if I quit my job, went to school full time rather than part time, and then went traveling for a year, got it out of my system, took my gap year kind of thing, and then got a real job. And I have a real job, but the other stuff never happened.
So tell us, okay, you started the blog sort of as a side thing, and then it became a full-time thing around 2010. Well, I want to ask you about how it's running now, but what did your family think? What did your parents think when, they obviously they didn't take you to travel a bunch as a kid. Now you're like, I'm going to travel full time. I'm going to have this blog. I'm going to make money from this. I'm not going to work a corporate job. Did your parents think you were just out of your mind, or were they supportive?
My parents didn't think I had a real job up until my first book came out. So, my parents still don't quite understand what I do, but they don't actually. My mom can't even log into Facebook, so it's not really a shocker. But it wasn't until they saw a couple of tax returns and my book came out. They were like, "Oh, I guess this is like an actual profession."
So I'm curious. You talked a little bit earlier about how in crisis comes opportunity, and so do you have any plans to somehow leverage COVID-19 and everything that's happening to maybe do something different in the travel space, or create anything different, or anything like that?
Honestly, we're going to start doing events.
Okay.
I know that's a weird thing to say, given that nobody can meet each other. But I think if you realize anything, I live in an industry that requires human movement to function. If nobody's going anywhere, you can't travel. It's not like gardening or cooking or learning a language. You have to be on the move. And so if anything, this experience has taught me is that we rely so much on, say, affiliate revenue or Google, you don't really build a brand and community of people that will be there in the tough times, that you can sort of lean on through, products and courses, or, donations or Patreon. And so, we had started to make this shift last year to doing more live events and more in-person meetups and creating sort of like a global travel club. And if anything, COVID has only made me want to triple down on that. And, these are small meetups, so 10, 20 people. But having that community and that brand, I think, is even more important. I think as we're all sheltered in place and inside, and we long for people, I think we realize just how more important community is. And, whether it's just friends and family or just a larger community of social clubs where you go and you meet people and you talk about things you love. I think once restrictions are removed, I think you're going to see a real increase in the amount of clubs people join, because we're going to be so deprived of human contact.
We'll get back to our conversation with Matt in just a minute.
Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but aren't sure you have the time or the desire to manage the investment? Perhaps you're afraid, like we were, that you'll make the mistake of choosing the wrong market or the wrong team and lose your entire investment. Well, that's exactly why we created the Goodegg Investor Club. We do the work of identifying solid real estate investment opportunities in the best markets around the country, and then partner with you to acquire these investments, and then we'll all share in the returns. We'll identify the growing markets, strong, experienced teams, and the solid deals. We do all the heavy lifting of managing the tenants and the renovations, and as a passive partner, you get to enjoy all the benefits of investing in real estate: monthly cash flow, long-term appreciation, and the ongoing tax benefits. When we first discovered passive investing through real estate syndications, we realized it fit perfectly into our busy lives. We could put our money to work for our families, work less, and get more time back in our days so that we could focus on what matters most and discover our true passion and purpose in life. We've now helped hundreds of people invest passively in real estate syndications and are seeing the positive impact it's had on their lives. We invite you to partner with us by joining the Goodegg Investor Club today so you can start putting your money to work for you and get more time back in your day. Because we know that when people have more time in their days, they can do the true work they were intended to do, and the world will be a better place. To sign up for the Goodegg Investor Club, go to goodegginvestments.com/invest and we'll take it from there. That's goodegginvestments.com/invest.
And now, back to our chat with Matt Kepnes.
I'm curious to kind of transition a little bit into talking about how one, and I don't know if you'd have any insight on this, but how one with 3 kids and a husband might be able to navigate this potential, traveling abroad on, $50 a day. Is that possible? Have you worked with families like that? Just kind of curious how that all works with schooling and, health insurance and any of that. Any tips there?
Well, travel insurance, as many people have found out, doesn't cover pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
as it turns out.
Well, people need to read their fine print. Everyone's shocked. I'm like, well, it's been in there since the dawn of time. If you're worried about insurance, there are companies like I Am Global that offers basically worldwide healthcare. It's like what you get, from Aetna for the world. Homeschooling, it's a huge thing, and there's world schooling, which is how people do it. I think the website is called worldschooling.com.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many resources. You wouldn't be the first family who decided to, take their kids and go travel the world. There's countless blogs and conferences and Facebook groups, Instagrammers and resources online. So when I started this whole thing, there wasn't a lot of information online. But if anything, there's so much information online. Like, there's too much, because now it's like, how do I sift through it all? Whereas before, there's like 2 websites on world schooling. They were last updated in 1996. There was a website I used when I started. It was called Backpacking Europe. And it was this girl's website. And it was just all about her study abroad trip. And it was a really simple HTML website. I always wonder what happened to that website. I can never find it. Typed in all versions of the domain name, and it just doesn't exist. But I wonder whatever happened to that, because it was a really good website. But that was what you had, and even then, when I was looking for things in 2005, 2006, before I went on my trip, then that site was a couple years old. But nowadays, millions of pieces of content are dropped online, every day. And so you're only limited by the desire to step out the door, not a lack of information.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Tell me about it. It's like information overwhelm out there. There's so much these days. So it's almost like it's hard to know where to get started. But I want to talk a little bit about the funding aspect of this travel. I think a lot of people, when they think about traveling the world, they think, oh my gosh, it's got to be so expensive, all these flights and hotels and all this stuff. So how do you do it on $50 a day? And what would you recommend for people who want to undertake something like this, where they're either traveling full time or traveling for several months at a time?
Well, when you think of that $50 a day number, it's sort of a daily average, right? And that includes your flights and insurance and all that. But if you think about your life, how much money do you spend per day? I can tell you I spend nothing today. Well, I've spent like $10. I went for lunch, right? But really, I've probably spent 60, 70 when you factor in my rent, my car insurance, my car payment, bills, and all that stuff, right? We don't think of that money when we're talking about how much we spend per day, but it's actually, there. And so if you add up your entire cost of living, $50 a day is $18,250, right? That's cheaper than most people live. That's like, for a lot of people, that's sometimes the rent, car insurance, and all that stuff rolled into one, right? But this is everything. And so when you start to travel, you realize that the world isn't that expensive, that public transportation is cheap, going grocery shopping is cheap, hostels are cheap, There's happy hours everywhere. And so you lose, it's basically like thinking about all the money you spend day to day without those sunk costs that you kind of just push out of your mind. So food, drinks, going out, all those things you do that you consider spending, that's all you're spending, not like that plus rent and all that other stuff. And so, the world is a lot cheaper than people think because, you want to go to Paris. People in Paris aren't spending $500 a day eating food and, drinking and doing all that stuff. Even if you want to factor in rent as a cost, everyday people live a normal life. They don't spend a lot of money. And if you do that, if you travel like you live, you're inherently not going to spend a lot of money, especially once you take away all those like crazy costs,
Mm-hmm.
When you go backpack or just travel the world, your car payments go away. And with it, the insurance costs and the gas costs. And so, that opens up $500-$600 a month.
Right. I think that's key, what you said there. Travel like you live. I think a lot of people miss that piece. Julie and I travel regularly with our kids, and we try to do it long term when we can. So we'll see how this summer shakes out. But Julie is planning on spending a couple months in Hawaii, and we're planning on spending a month in France. Is it easier, would you say, when you slow travel to live on a budget, or would you say that you can do it, you can live on $50 a day or a small budget or frugally, even if you travel every day from one place to another?
The faster you travel, the more it's going to cost, because you're just driving up your transportation costs. And then if you're traveling a lot, like if you're moving one place to another, you're going to probably have a lot more meals on the go. And that's going to be pricier than, say, staying one place for a while and buying some groceries. And so slow travel is a much cheaper way to travel because you can dollar cost that, everything out a little more. And you're not spending as much money on transportation. If you're in one city for a week, you can, even if you're in Paris, you can just go buy some groceries. So you don't have to eat out every meal, right? And if you're moving, train station food, airport food, that's more expensive than anything else. So even if you have a cheap sandwich at the airport, you're still spending a ton of money. So yeah, slow travel is much better.
Mm-hmm. I want to switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit more about your business. So a lot of our listeners either invest in real estate or they have businesses of their own. So the business that you've built, obviously travel is very important to you. How have you been able to build your business and scale your business so that you've been still able to travel?
Well, I work remote. One of the benefits of running a website is that it can be done anywhere. So I always had that natural ability to, be able to do it from anywhere. But one of the things that I've done, that's really helped is the fact that, I have a team of people. I think it's really important to hire out as quickly as possible because you can't do everything, especially when you travel. One of the lessons I learned the hard way is that if you're going to work and travel at the same time, one of them is going to suffer.
Mm.
So it's always better to get somebody else to do the work, but B, slow travel because, maybe every fourth day you just work straight. But so developing a schedule and hiring out has really helped.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to do both at the same time. That way, you can be fully focused on the task at hand.
And tell us about your investments. Before we started recording, we were talking about how you invest or you have a commercial property. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that came about.
I co-own a hostel in Austin, and my friend started the hostel, and I always wanted to do it too. So I just said, well, I'd like to invest in it. And so we invested together, and now we own the house. So it's a commercial real estate here in Austin. It wasn't anything like I'm going to buy a rental property and become a landlord or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess in some ways I'm a landlord because it's a hospitality business, but no, it was just, we leased it and then we had the opportunity to buy and we took it.
Mm. And how big is it?
I have no idea. I mean, I can tell you how many beds. I have no idea how big the lot is.
Oh, yeah.
Acre.
Yeah.
I mean, you got me.
Well, how many beds is it, or how many rooms?
It's a full-size house that we converted into a hostel.
Okay.
So
Got it.
yeah,
Okay.
it's got a big lot in the back for 6 cars. So I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, very cool. That is very cool, and it's so in line with everything that you value. And Austin is such a cool place to go. So you're telling me if I go to Austin, I can stay in Nomadic Matt's hostel. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's not called Nomadic Matt's Hostel, but yeah, yes.
And I'm sure many of our listeners are curious, how has COVID-19 impacted particularly that hostel? Let's start there.
Well, it's been closed. So
Okay.
since all these businesses are shut down by the city, it's been empty since early March. So about 2 months now.
And what do you foresee will be the impact long-term after all of this sort of settles down, we get back to, quote, normal? You know, what will travel look like for the hostel, for your business, for your own personal travel? How do you think the pandemic will impact all of that?
You know, it's going to be a lot smaller. Travel is going to be a smaller thing for the foreseeable future. And
what do you mean by small?
You're going to see less people on the road. You're going to see fewer people traveling. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Over-tourism was the talk of the town, so to speak, in the industry for many years, as destinations just couldn't handle the crowds. And so I think as cities rebuild in a more sustainable way, you know, those massive amounts of crowds are just going to go away. And I think that's a good thing. So you can build travel in just more sustainable. And I think that's good.
So for somebody who might be listening in now, who's thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I want to be able to travel once the restrictions are lifted and we can go out again. You know, how can somebody plan a trip around the world or plan to do full-time travel like this?
What do you mean?
Like, where would you recommend that they start? Should they start with saving up a certain amount of money? Should they start by making a list of all their dream countries? What's the first step?
I think the first step is the money. It's nice to plan everything. You can buy a bunch of guidebooks and then plan destinations, but I always recommend people get a handle on their finances. Write a list of all your expenses and see what you can cut and start, figure out how much you can save and how long it will take to go away. Because when you go traveling, all your plans go out the window anyway. And you end up, going all these various ways. So you don't really want to overplan the destinations too much. So it's really just more about save the biggest pile of money you can. And then when you feel like you've saved enough, start thinking about, okay, where am I going to go? Because once you start going on a long-term trip, for a year, you're going to end up changing all your plans. You're going to be like, I'm going to go to Europe. And then after 2 months, you'll be like, I actually want to go to Asia now. And then you're going to say, I'm going to spend 3 months in Thailand. You're going to hate Thailand. And then you're going to go to Cambodia for a week. And then 5 months later, you're still in Cambodia. It's more about the money than the destination plan.
That's sage advice. I love it.
All right. Should we move into our investing for good impact round?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to ask you 3 questions around investing in the world and yourself and others. So the first question is around investing in yourself. So what is one way that your investments are helping you to live a better life?
I guess, do you mean cash investments?
Yeah, like any investments that you've made, whether it's a time investment or a money investment, how are the investments that you've made in your life like helping, you to live maybe a more successful life or a more fulfilling life, anything along those lines?
I would say, by freeing up time and cash, I can live life on my own terms.
Hmm.
It is the reason why I ended up, traveling, because I wanted to just do whatever I wanted to do unrestricted. And, by investing in myself and creating a business, I have that opportunity.
Yeah, that's what a lot of our guests on the show say about their investments is it just creates that flexibility and that time freedom. So, yeah. Okay, second one is investing in others. So what is one, usually we ask an investment strategy, but in your case, what is one like maybe life hack or travel hack that you might want to share with the audience that could be really useful for them?
A good life hack. Always buy travel insurance.
And make sure pandemics are covered.
Yeah. I think a good life hack is to schedule out your free time and your entire day. Like, it seems weird to be like, wake up at this time. But I think, especially when it's very easy to get caught up in the busy trap and not end up having time for yourself. And so even just a simple thing like 30-minute Netflix, like, I'm always going to have the time for the things I want if I schedule it. And, I know I'm always going to have time to, go cook because it's right there in the schedule. It's already been planned out. And so I don't really even think that takes away from like the spontaneity, because I know like sometimes I'll just write fun time. That can be whatever I want. But I know when work stops and when work starts, and I know like I'll always have time to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, that's a good one. I live by that, Annie. I'm a scheduler. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen. And pretty much everything down to work and free time and time with my kids, it's all in there. So that's a good one. All right, last one is around investing in the world. So what is one way that your investments are helping to make the world a better place?
Well, as part of the website, we have a community charity called Flight. Foundation for Learning and Youth Travel Education. And so, we fundraise to send high school students on study abroad trips so that they get out of their community and learn about the world while also seeing a practical application for their education. So really helping kids, see that the world is full of possibility.
I love that. You've sort of come full circle from, you setting out on your world adventures for yourself, really discovering the world, really discovering your passion for travel, and now inspiring that in the next generation. I love it. So what is the best place beyond nomadicmat.com, of course, for people to go to learn more about you and to connect with you?
Besides Nomadic Mat, we're Nomadic Mat on all social media channels. So really just type in what your preferred platform, /Nomadic Mat, and you'll find me there. And the charity website is takeflight.org, LYTE.
Okay, well, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Matt Kepnes, creator of nomadicmat.com. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Investing for Good, the #1 podcast for people like you who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. For more resources, check out goodegginvestments.com/podcast. And be sure to join the Investing for Good Facebook community. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you amazing new conversations every week. Until next time, keep investing for good.